They called it the Orchard of Ghosts. 100 trees stood in perfect military rows across 12 acres of forgotten land, and every single one of them looked like it had already died and forgotten to fall down. The bark was peeling away in papery sheets, exposing bone-grey wood underneath. Limbs snapped at cruel angles, reaching toward a sky that seemed to have given up on them years ago. The leaves had not returned for 3 springs. The buds had dried into hard black nubs that would never open. When the wind moved through the branches, it did not rustle leaves. It whistled through hollow wood, a sound like mourning. They laughed when Maya Bennett bought them. She signed the deed on a Tuesday in March, at a folding table in the county clerk's office, while her older brother sat in the corner with his arms crossed, and a smirk that had been sharpening itself since childhood. The auctioneer had started the bidding at $5,000 for the parcel, and when nobody raised a hand, he dropped it to $3,000. Then $2,000. Then $1,000 for 12 acres of prime agricultural land with 100 fruit trees that had once produced the finest heritage, apples and pears in the county. Still nobody moved. The bank representative checked his phone. The neighbors whispered. Finally, Maya raised her hand and offered $320. $3.20 per tree. $3.20 for everything her grandfather had built. The room erupted. Her brother Derek laughed first. It was not the laugh of surprise. It was the laugh of confirmation, the sound a man makes when the world proves him right. He had been telling Maya for years that she was too soft for farming, too sentimental for business, too much like their mother, who had left when Maya was 6 and never looked back. Their Aunt Patricia, who had driven 2 hours to watch the family estate be divided, covered her mouth with a gloved hand, but her shoulders shook. The auctioneer, a kind man named Roy, who had known Maya since she was a girl, selling lemonade at the county fair, simply closed his book and shook his head. "Sold," he said, but he said it like an apology. Maya took the keys. She took the deed. She took the stack of unpaid water bills and the notice from the county about dead trees constituting a fire hazard. She took the rusted mailbox with the name Bennett faded into the metal, and she took the laughter. She took all of it, packed it into the back of her second-hand pickup truck, and drove it 12 miles out of town to the property that everyone else had decided was worthless. The gate groaned when she pushed it open. The chain had rusted through, hanging like a broken necklace. The gravel drive, once white and crisp, had been swallowed by cheatgrass and thistle. She walked the rows for the first time at sunset, and the trees looked even worse up close. This was not dormancy. This was not a hard winter that had stolen the blooms and left the wood alive underneath. Her uncle, in the 5 years he had controlled the property after her grandfather's death, had sprayed every inch with industrial herbicides to kill the weeds, and the drift had poisoned the root systems. He had overpruned the canopy to sell the wood for quick cash. He had diverted the irrigation to a rental property he owned 2 miles away, leaving these trees to thirst through 3 drought summers. Maya pressed her palm against the trunk of tree number 47, the one her grandfather had called the Old General, because it produced the most consistent harvest. The bark crumbled under her touch. Beneath it, the cambium layer was dry and brown, dead. Officially, undeniably dead. She slept that first night in the bed of her truck, wrapped in a wool blanket that smelled like her grandfather's closet. The stars were brutal and bright without the canopy to soften them. She did not cry. She had learned early that tears were currency that bought nothing in this family. But she did whisper into the dark, "What did you leave me, Grandpa? What am I supposed to do with ghosts?" In the morning, she began. The county extension agent came on day 3. He was a tired man in a polo shirt that had been washed too many times, and he walked the rows with a clipboard, ticking boxes. "Fire hazard," he said. "You'll need to clear them. I can get you a quote for removal. About $8,000. Maybe you can sell the wood for firewood, get a few hundred back." He looked at Maya like she was a child playing house. "Or," he said, lowering his voice, "you could let the county take it. Abandonment. They'll clear it and bill the estate. Not your problem." Maya thanked him. She did not tell him that she had exactly $412 left in her checking account after the purchase. She did not tell him that she had quit her job as a veterinary assistant in town to do this, that her apartment lease ended in 2 weeks, that she had no plan B. She simply walked him to his car and watched him drive away, his tires kicking up dust that hung in the air like a question mark. Derek came on day 5. He did not call first. He never called first. He arrived in his new truck, the one he had bought with his share of the inheritance, and leaned against the hood while Maya tried to dig a test hole near tree number 12. The soil was hardpan clay, compacted by years of chemical abuse, and her shovel bounced off it like a drum. "You look ridiculous," Derek said. He was eating a sandwich from the deli in town, the expensive kind with imported cheese. Mom would be embarrassed. Maya did not look up. "Mom left exactly, and you're following her playbook, romanticizing failure." He took another bite, chewing loudly. "Patricia thinks you should cut your losses. Sign the land back over to the estate. We'll sell it to the developers from Sacramento. They're looking for warehouse space. You'll get a few grand, enough to get an apartment in the city. Be smart for once, Maya." She kept digging. The shovel made a sound like a clock ticking. "I bought it," she said. "It's mine. It's a graveyard. Graveyards have value. People visit them. They leave flowers." Derek laughed again, that same laugh from the auction room, and tossed the remainder of his sandwich into the dirt near her boots. "Call me when you need gas money to drive back to town," he said. "I'll be busy. I'm expanding the rental portfolio." He left. The sandwich sat in the dirt. Maya did not move it. She kept digging until the sun went down and her hands were blistered. The hole was 2 feet deep. The soil was dead. No worms, no mycelium, no life. Just clay the color of old bruises. The neighbors came next. The Hendersons, who owned the almond operation to the east, walked their property line with their hands on their hips, staring. Mrs. Henderson called the county twice about visual blight and property values. Mr. Silvano, who grew table grapes to the west, offered to burn the trees for her. "Controlled burn," he said, leaning on her fence with a toothpick in his mouth. "I'll do it for free. Get rid of the eyesore. You can plant something easy next year. Tomatoes maybe. Or just sell the land and move on. This soil's finished. Everyone knows it." Maya smiled at him. It was not a real smile. It was the smile of a woman who had decided that the entire world was her antagonist, and that she would be polite to every single one of them, because politeness was the only weapon they could not confiscate. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Silvano," she said. "But I'm going to see what they need first. They're dead, sweetheart. Dead things don't need anything." She did not correct him. She went back to her work. She lived in the truck for 3 weeks. She built a rudimentary shelter against the cab using tarps and rope, and she cooked on a camp stove that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. She showered at the truck stop 6 miles down the highway, washing her hair in the sink and changing in the handicapped stall. She ate beans from cans and rice from a 20-pound bag. And she saved every dollar for the trees. Because something was wrong with what everyone was telling her, and she could not name it yet. But she felt it in her bones the same way she had felt, at age 9, that the limping dog on the side of the road was worth saving. Even when the adults said to leave it. The feeling crystallized on the 22nd day. She had been clearing the base of tree number 1, the northernmost tree in the western row. The one her grandfather had planted first when he was 23 years old. The bark was gone from the trunk, stripped by wind and time. But the root flare was massive, a wooden iceberg with only its tip showing above the soil. Maya was on her knees, pulling cheatgrass away from the wood, when her fingers found a gap. Not a crack, a gap, a deliberate space. She peered into the hollow where the trunk met the earth, and she saw something that made her breath stop. A glass jar, mason jar, old with a zinc lid green with oxidation. She pulled it out with both hands. It was heavy. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had gone stiff and yellow, was a notebook. A leather-bound field journal, the kind her grandfather had carried in his breast pocket for 60 years. She knew the handwriting before she opened it, the slanted, careful script, the way he crossed his T's with a small flourish like a bird taking flight. Maya sat against the dead trunk and opened the first page. For the one who listens to the wood, T it read. For the one who does not believe that death is the end. For my Maya, who will come when everyone else has gone. Her hands shook so badly she could barely turn the page. The journal was a map. Not of the land above ground, but of the life underneath it. Her grandfather had spent the last 15 years of his life conducting a secret experiment, one he had told no one about because he knew his son, Maya's uncle, would sell the knowledge for scrap. He had inoculated the root systems of every single one of the 100 trees with spores of tuber melanosporum, the Perigord black truffle. He had done it using an old French method he had learned during his military service in Provence, a method that required patience, precision, and a belief that the best things in the world grow in darkness where no one can see them. The fruit trees were not meant to be fruit trees. Not primarily, they were host trees. The apples and pears were a bonus, a beautiful byproduct, but the real crop was underground. The mycelium, her grandfather explained, takes 7 to 10 years to establish a symbiotic relationship with the host roots. The trees provide sugars. The truffles provide minerals and water access. It is a marriage that happens in silence, in the dark, in the places where human eyes cannot reach. But there was a problem. Her uncle's chemicals. Her grandfather had anticipated this. On page 34, he had written, "The fool will poison the soil. He will think he is killing weeds. He will not know he is feeding the fire." Truffle mycelium is ancient. It has survived comets and ice ages. A little roundup is an inconvenience, not a death sentence. The trees may look dead above ground. The mycelium will retreat. It will wait. It is patient. It has been waiting since the dinosaurs. It can wait for one foolish man to finish his work. Maya read it 3 times. Then she read the next section, which detailed exactly what needed to be done to wake the sleeping network. Limestone. The soil pH had to be raised to 7.9, organic matter. Not fertilizer from a bag but living compost, rich in the bacteria that the mycelium needed to process minerals. Water, but not too much. Pruning, but careful pruning, to redirect the tree's remaining energy to the root system instead of trying to rebuild a canopy that was already lost. And time. Most of all, time. The mycelium had been in stasis for 5 years. It would need 12 months of perfect conditions to rebuild its network and begin fruiting. 12 months. Maya looked at the date on the journal. Her grandfather had written the final entry 3 weeks before his heart attack. He had known he was running out of time. He had left this for her. Specifically for her, because she was the only one who would look at 100 dead trees and see something other than firewood. She did not sleep that night. She read the journal by flashlight, every page, every diagram, every note about soil composition and root depth, and the way the autumn rains would trigger the first fruiting bodies if everything was done correctly. She learned that tree number 1, the old general, had the most established mycelium network. She learned that trees 40 through 60 in the eastern row had been inoculated with a secondary strain that produced smaller truffles but in greater volume. She learned that the dead appearance of the trees was actually a blessing in disguise. Without leaves to support, the trees could direct 100% of their stored energy to root repair and mycelium expansion. Her uncle, in his ignorance, had accidentally created the perfect conditions for a truffle orchard. He had stripped the canopy, which meant no transpiration stress. He had stopped watering, which forced the roots to dig deeper into the limestone bedrock where the minerals were richest. He had poisoned the topsoil, which killed the competing fungi, leaving the truffle mycelium with no rivals when it woke up. Notcha, Maya realized, was not her enemy. It was her ally. It had been waiting. It had been patient. It had let the fools do their work. And now it was ready to do its own. She started the next morning. The work was not cinematic. There were no montages set to inspiring music, at least not in the real world. There was only Maya, a shovel, a wheelbarrow she found in the barn, and a determination that bordered on religious fervour. She hauled limestone from the quarry 8 miles away, 50 pounds at a time in the bed of her truck, and she spread it by hand around the base of every tree. She made compost from the deli scraps in town, from the coffee grounds she collected from the diner, from the manure she gathered from a horse farm 10 miles north. She turned it with a pitchfork. She watered it. She let it cook. She screened it and carried it, 1 bucket at a time, to the base of each tree. She pruned the dead wood, not with the violent hacking her uncle had used, but with surgical precision, making clean cuts that the tree could seal without infection. She installed a drip irrigation system using old hoses she found in the barn and connectors she bought with money she earned working weekends at the feed store. She did this alone. No team, no volunteers, no romantic interest who showed up with a truck and a charming smile. Just Maya. Maya, in the heat of July, when the clay soil baked into brick and her hands cracked and bled. Maya in the August fires, when the smoke drifted from the west and turned the sun red, and she wore a bandana over her face and kept working. Maya in the October rains, when the mud sucked at her boots and the compost turned to soup and she had to rebuild the drainage ditches 3 times. Maya in the December frost, when her breath hung in the air and her fingers went numb around the pruning shears and she could not feel her toes. But she kept going, because the journal said the cold months were when the mycelium grew most aggressively, sending out filaments like underground fingers, searching, connecting, building. The neighbours watched. Mr. Silvano drove by every Tuesday, slowing his truck to a crawl, shaking his head. The Hendersons installed a privacy fence along the property line so they would not have to see her fool's errand. Derek sent 1 text in September. Still alive? She did not reply. She was too busy. She was too busy reading the soil. She was too busy noticing that the clay, by October, had begun to crumble. She was too busy seeing the first earthworms return in November, pale and tentative, then fat and confident by December. She was too busy watching the bark on tree number 1, which had been smooth dead grey in March, begin to develop a texture by January, a roughness that meant the cambium was trying to wake up. She was too busy, most of all, with the smell. The smell started in late February, almost a year to the day since she had signed the deed. It was not a bad smell. It was an ancient smell, earthy, musky, like wet forest and dark chocolate, and something else, something that made her think of churches and cellars, and the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. It came from the soil, around trees 12, 13, and 14. She knelt and pressed her face to the earth, and she inhaled, and she knew. She knew before she saw the signs. She knew before the dog found the first one. She knew because her grandfather had written about it in the journal. When the soil begins to sing, you are close. When it begins to smell like the beginning of the world, you are there in March. She borrowed a dog. Not a trained truffle hound. She could not afford one of those. She borrowed a mixed breed named Buster from the feed store owner. A dog with no pedigree but a nose that could find a dropped sandwich in a hurricane. She led him to tree number 1. He sniffed, he circled, he pawed. He looked at her with an expression that said, "You didn't know this was here?" It's everywhere. Maya got on her knees. She used a small trowel, the way the journal instructed, gently, gently, so as not to damage the mycelium network that was still fragile, still rebuilding. She pushed the trowel into the soil 6 inches from the trunk. She felt resistance, not rock, not root, something else. She widened the hole, and there, nestled against the wood like a black pearl, was the first truffle. It was the size of a golf ball, black, rough, warty, irregular. The most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She lifted it to her nose and inhaled, and the smell was the same as the soil but concentrated. 1,000 years of forest floor compressed into 1 ounce of flesh. She weighed it on the kitchen scale she kept in the truck. 42 grams. At market rate, that was roughly $80. From one tree, from one hole, from one moment of digging in dirt that everyone else had called worthless. She found 11 more that day. Around tree number 1, around tree number 2, around tree 5, which the journal said had been a slow starter, but was now, apparently, fully awake. By the end of the week, she had harvested 4 pounds. By the end of the month, with Buster coming every morning and Maya learning to read the subtle signs, the slight swelling of the soil, the presence of certain flies, the way the grass grew differently in a circle around the active roots. She had 18 pounds of fresh Perigord black truffles. She did not sell them at the farmer's market. She did not post on social media. She followed her grandfather's instructions on page 67 of the journal, the page he had marked with a red ribbon. She called a man named Henri Laurent in San Francisco, a chef she had never met but who her grandfather had served with in Provence. She sent him 4 ounces by overnight mail. She did not include a note. She did not need to. The truffles spoke for themselves. Henry called her 24 hours later. His voice was thick with an accent that had not faded in 40 years, and thick with something else. Wonder. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "My grandfather's orchard. These are Perigord. These are better than Perigord. These are—" He stopped. She heard him inhale, the same way she had inhaled over the soil. "I will buy everything you have. I will pay $2,200 per pound. And Maya, if this is consistent, if this is not a fluke, I will connect you with people who will pay more. Michelin people, Tokyo people, Dubai people. Do you understand what you have? I think so, she said. I don't think you do, Henry said. But you will. The harvest continued through April, May and into June. The first flush, the spring flush, yielded 47 pounds. The summer flush, which no one had expected because truffles were supposed to be a winter crop, yielded another 31 pounds. The autumn flush, the big one, the one her grandfather had circled in red ink in the journal, yielded 89 pounds. 167 pounds of fresh black truffles in the first 12 months. At an average price of $2,000 per pound, that was $334,000 in gross revenue. But that was not the $1 million. The $1 million came from the contract. Henry had been true to his word. He had brought 3 buyers to the property in October, men and women in suits that looked absurd against the backdrop of the orchard. They walked the rows. They knelt. They smelled the soil. They watched Buster work, his tail wagging, his nose to the ground, finding treasure where there had once been only death. They took samples. They sent them to labs in France and Italy. The reports came back: purity index 99.2%, aroma profile exceptional, mycelium strain unique, possibly a proprietary variant developed over decades of careful selection by the original cultivator. One of the buyers, a woman named Sarah Chen, who represented a consortium of Michelin-starred restaurants across North America, made the offer on a Tuesday in November, exactly 12 months, and 1 week after Maya had signed the deed for $320. Exclusive supply rights for 3 years. Minimum guaranteed purchase. $1 million. Upfront payment. $250,000. The rest paid out quarterly against delivery. Maya signed it at the same folding table in the county clerk's office where she had bought the land. This time, the room was not empty. This time, there were cameras from the local news. This time, Roy the auctioneer was smiling instead of apologizing. And this time, her brother was not in the corner laughing. He was not there at all. He had not been invited. But he came anyway. Derek arrived 3 days after the news broke. He came in the afternoon when Maya was walking the rows with Buster, checking the winter dormancy of the mycelium network. She heard his truck before she saw it. The expensive engine, the expensive tires on the gravel drive that she had finally repaired with money from the first harvest. He got out slowly. He was wearing a jacket she did not recognize. He had lost weight. His eyes had the hollow look of a man who had made a series of bad bets and was still waiting for the final results. "Nice place," he said. He tried to make it sound casual. It sounded like a confession. "Thank you," Maya said. She did not stop walking. Buster stayed at her heel, his nose to the ground. "I saw the news. The contract, $1 million. He laughed. But it was a different laugh now. Not the laugh of confirmation. The laugh of a man trying to find his footing on ground that has suddenly shifted. "Grandpa always liked you best, I guess." Maya stopped. She turned. She looked at her brother, really looked at him, for the first time in years. She saw the fear. She saw the envy. She saw the desperate hope that she would be magnanimous, that she would say something like, "We're family," or "Let's work together," or "Of course I'll help you." "Do you know what Grandpa wrote in his journal?" she asked. Derek blinked. "What?" "He wrote that truffles grow in the dark because that's where the best things happen." In the dark, in the quiet, in the places where nobody is watching, and nobody is cheering, and nobody believes anything good is possible. She bent down and scratched Buster behind the ears. "He left this for me, Derek. Not because he liked me best, because I was the only one who would have looked." Derek's jaw tightened. "I'm your brother. I know. I could help you. Manage the business side. Marketing. You're good with the dirt, but you're not good with people. You never were. Maya straightened. She looked past him, at the 100 trees that had once been dead, and were now the most valuable orchard in the county. She looked at the new irrigation system, the rebuilt barn, the truck she had paid off, the sign she had hung on the gate that morning. She looked at the life she had built, inch by inch, dollar by dollar, alone in the dark, with a shovel and a journal, and a faith that nobody else had understood. I am good with people, she said quietly. I just don't need very many of them. She walked back to her work. Buster followed, his nose to the earth, searching for the next miracle. Derek stood in the drive for a long time, the expensive truck idling behind him, the afternoon sun turning the orchard gold and green and alive. Eventually, he got back in and drove away. He did not come back. The neighbours came, of course. Mr. Silvano, who had offered to burn the trees, came with a bottle of wine and a proposal to partner on expanding the truffle cultivation to his own property. Maya thanked him and declined. The Hendersons, who had built the privacy fence, sent a letter through their lawyer asking if she would consider selling the eastern 5 acres to resolve the boundary dispute. Maya had her own lawyer send a letter back. There was no boundary dispute. There was only regret, dressed up in legal language. Aunt Patricia sent a card at Christmas. It had a picture of a kitten on the front. Inside, in her careful cursive, she wrote, I always knew you had it in you. Family should stick together. Love, Aunt Pat. Maya put the card on the mantel of the small cabin she had built in the old barn foundation. She did not write back. She was too busy. She was too busy because the second year was bigger than the first. The Mycelium Network, fully awake now, fully established, produced 212 pounds. Then 300. Then 400. Chefs from Tokyo and Paris and Dubai flew in to walk the rows themselves, to kneel in the dirt beside her, to inhale the smell of the beginning of the world. Agricultural University sent researchers. A documentary crew spent 3 weeks filming Buster and the trees and Maya's hands, which were scarred and calloused and gentle all at the same time. But she never forgot the first year. She never forgot the 22nd day, the glass jar, the journal. She never forgot the feel of the dead bark crumbling under her palm. She never forgot the laughter in the auction room, or the sandwich in the dirt, or the sound of her shovel bouncing off hard-pan clay like a drum. She kept the deed framed in her cabin, the one that said $320. She kept the first truffle she had found, now dried and preserved, in a small glass box on her desk. And she kept the journal, always, in her breast pocket, the way her grandfather had carried it, the way he had carried his faith in the dark and quiet places, where the best things grow. Sometimes, late at night, when the irrigation was running and the stars were brutal and bright, she would walk the rows alone. The trees were not dead anymore. They were not fruit trees anymore. Either. Not really. They were something older. Something that had survived chemicals and drought and mockery and neglect. Something that had waited in the dark for the right person to come along with the right kind of patience. And when she pressed her palm against the trunk of tree number 1, the old general, she could feel it. Not just the wood, not just the life, but the network underneath, the silent marriage of root and fungus, the ancient conversation happening in the dark where no one could see. They had laughed when she bought 100 dead fruit trees. They had called it a graveyard. They had called her a fool. They had called her soft, sentimental, too much like her mother. They had offered to burn it, to bulldoze it, to take it off her hands for a few dollars. and the promise that she would go away and stop embarrassing them. But Maya had not gone away. She had stayed. She had listened to the wood. She had learned the language of the dark. And 12 months later, when the first frost came, and Buster's tail began to wag, and the soil began to sing its ancient song, she had proven them wrong. Not with anger, not with revenge, not with cruelty or shouting, or the satisfaction of slamming a door in someone's face. She had proven them wrong simply by staying alive, by staying working, by believing that what looked like death was only waiting, and that the best miracles in the world are the ones you have to dig for. The sign on her gate did not say, "Keep out." It did not say, "I told you so." It said something her grandfather had written on the last page of the journal, the page she had found only after the first harvest, tucked into the back cover. A note he had added in shakier handwriting, closer to the end. It said, "Closed to doubt, open to wonder," and beneath that, in Maya's own handwriting, she had added one more line. They laughed. I dug. The earth answered. The gate groans when visitors push it open now, but the chain is new and strong. The gravel drive is white and crisp again. The 100 trees stand in perfect military rows. And in the dark, in the quiet, in the places where human eyes cannot reach, they are still working, still waiting, still growing the next miracle for the next person, brave enough to believe that dead things are only sleeping, and that the best treasures in the world are the ones you cannot see until you are willing to get down on your knees and dig.